Hey, my name is Zachary Manta, and I'm here in my living room to share with you something that I started working on over a year ago. At the time, I was a teacher doing middle school science, so the best years, when one day I got hurt. I live in Idaho, and there's a ski mountain nearby where I took a fall and ended up with a bruised left meniscus. That's far from the worst injury people get while skiing, but for me, it was the most that I had ever been hurt. So it served as an introduction to a feeling that some of you are probably all too familiar with: the boredom and frustration that come with dealing with a long-term injury. Every day you're reminded of your pain and limitation 100 times, but it heals so slowly that some days you can't even tell if you're moving in the right direction. I wanted to know for sure that I was doing everything I could to make progress. So in addition to physical therapy, I asked what I thought was a simple question. Should I put ice on the injury or should I put heat on it? And it turns out that is not a simple question. If you start talking to trainers and looking at things online, you will encounter every perspective imaginable on icing versus heating for injuries. The traditional advice says put ice on it. That'll reduce swelling and inflammation. But a common response to that says, why would you want to reduce swelling and inflammation? Those are part of the body's natural healing process. And maybe if you reduce them, you're actually going to slow your healing down. So maybe you should put heat on it instead. That makes a lot of sense, but then a common response to that says, whoa, definitely don't put heat on your injury. That could aggravate it and actually make it worse. I asked my doctor, but what he said was he usually recommends people try both ice and heat and stick with whichever one they just like better. I talked to a bunch of family friends who had also been through injuries and found that they had encountered the same frustration over all the conflicting advice. And that's when my thinking about this started to change from just a personal problem into potentially a much bigger issue. This year in the United States, over 7 million people will suffer orthopedic injuries. Right now, their heating versus icing protocol depends on an arbitrary mix of what their trainer happens to think and the things they come across online. It's likely to be less than perfect, and if anything, could be harmful. That's when I decided to do what you're supposed to do when you encounter a hard science question. I went to the evidence. This is the primary literature, not takes from the internet, but peer-reviewed papers written by real scientists who have conducted experiments and run meta-analyses trying to get to the bottom of the effects of heat and cold on the body. And after going through everything we know, what I concluded is this: the whole science and controversy around heating versus icing an injury makes sense if you just stretch it out into a timeline. I have to restrain myself from going too much into the details here. If you want more of it, there's a whole deep dive video that I created going through each paper in detail, as well as a science page on my website where I link all the sources so you can see for yourself. The simple version of it is the traditional advice is correct that you should ice an injury, but only for the acute stage, maybe the first 3 days after the injury takes place. After day 3, you want to swap instead to what's called contrast therapy, changing back and forth hot, cold for several minutes each at a time. That takes you through the subacute stage, and when that ends, you want to change over to just heat, maybe around the 2-week mark. At this point, heat can help maximize blood flow, reduce stiffness, increase range of motion, and some other benefits. The timeline brought me a lot of clarity, but the next question became, okay, is there a good way to actually do all of this? Is there a product that can take you through the entire timeline of applying just cold and then contrast and just heat? And it turns out that there's not much. Most people are getting by with your standard hot packs and cold packs that have been around for 50 years. But it's 2026, and we've got to be able to do better than that. People I had spoken to who had gotten knee surgery had all been prescribed one of these cold water circulation therapy units, which are amazing for applying cold, but have no way of doing heat or contrast. So they become less than optimal after day 3. These usually end up collecting dust in a closet somewhere. The best of the best devices in the world are professional devices, like the Vastutherm 5 or the Game Ready Med4 Elite. These heat or cool a reservoir of water and circulate it to a therapy pad worn by a patient. You could buy one, but it seems kind of crazy to buy something that costs you an arm and a leg. It turns out that the only product in a consumer price range that even tries to do cold, heat, and contrast is this. This is something called the Recovery Therm Knee by Therabody, the billion-dollar company that makes the Theragun. It has these thermoelectric tiles in it called Peltier devices that can get hot or cold or change back and forth to do contrast. The product costs $450, but it was just what I was looking for, so I eventually got one. And I have to say, after buying this thing and using it for a little while, that if Therabody were one of my 8th grade students and they turned this in for a project, this product gets like a C-. You'll see why in just a second. Eventually I said maybe this is an opportunity to try to actually build something myself that could be useful to people. I knew I wanted to go with water circulation. It's the only way to deliver real cold and real heat. That's what all the best devices do. But they over-engineer it so much that it costs thousands of dollars. After 6 months of tinkering and brainstorming in the garage, what I arrived at is this. This is a prototype for what I'm now looking to develop into a full-on consumer product called the Contrast Cube. I know it doesn't look like much right now, but think of it as a proof of concept, evidence that the basic design actually works. It's right now made out of a cooler and some parts I bought online for around $100. But already it can do what no other product on the market can do for less than thousands of dollars. It can apply real cold water circulation therapy to a targeted body part or limb for hours on end, or apply serious hot water circulation, and it can swap back and forth between them to do rapid contrast. Right now, in order to change it, I have to swap these valves manually, but the final version of the product wouldn't be like that. It would be automated and maybe look something like this AI rendering. I can give you 4 reasons why this is a superior design to products that are already on the market. To see why, let's take it to the garage for a few head-to-head tests. First up, the cold test. Reviews had warned me that this was the fatal flaw of my competitor's design. Thermoelectric tiles just don't get that cold. I ran both products on max cold settings for 5 minutes straight, then flipped over the recovery therm knee and checked their temperatures with this infrared thermometer gun. The surfaces of the tiles themselves bottom out at around 55 degrees. The fabric between the tiles hovers more around 65. As a user, this feels more like getting blasted by your car's AC than the true cold of ice or water. The therapy pad of my prototype reached 42.9 degrees, spread evenly throughout the whole pad. Second, the contrast test. Since both products have been running cold, I switched them over to max heat to see how long it takes them to make the transition. I even give the competitor a little head start. This has to go quickly for the contrast mode to be meaningful, otherwise you waste time being lukewarm in between. My prototype starts out colder, but quickly surpasses the recovery therm knee as warm water rushes in and pushes out the cold. We reach our target temperature range of over 90 degrees in just 17 seconds. Next up, the noise test. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Check, check. Last up, the adaptability test. I recruited some help for this one from my friend Jake. The purpose of this test is to see how many different body parts you can treat with one single product. We started with knees, which both products pass with flying colors. When we move to shoulders, it's a different story. My same therapy pad and straps are able to wrap securely around my shoulder, but Jake struggles. The recovery therm knee is just not shaped for that. A separate company called HyperIce sells a similar device which is shaped just for shoulders, but it'll cost you another $450. Lastly, our backs. In this case, I actually switch out the pad I've been using for a rectangular one that uses the same connectors. Having switchable pads means a user would only ever have to buy the main enclosure once, then could adapt it to virtually any body part they need for the price of an accessory. Needless to say, Jake struggles. Want to hear some good news? Contrary to popular belief, Americans have actually been getting more and more active in recent years. We're breaking records in gym memberships and outdoor recreation. All that activity is great, but along with it comes more soreness, fatigue, and injury. The Contrast Cube could be every athlete's new best friend. For those reasons, for the moment, I've stepped away from my teaching career and I'm working on developing it into a business full-time. Last week, I took the step of filing a provisional utility patent. And now I'm staring down the long and expensive road of engineering a consumer hardware product. If you agree that this should be a reality and want to help support our journey, there's a few ways in which you can. Most urgently, I'm looking to put together a team of experts and advisors. If you happen to be or know an orthopedic surgeon, physical therapist, or high-level athlete who's into contrast, please let's get in touch. Second, I would invite you to take a look at contrastcube.com. You'll find the science page and deep dive video I mentioned earlier, along with a feedback survey. It would mean the world to me if you took the time to fill this out. It's a chance to weigh in on the features you care about as we build this into a real product. There's also something called a blind survey, which is intended to be sent to people who haven't watched this video so that we can get their unbiased opinion. If there's anyone you'd feel comfortable sending that to, that would be extra helpful. If what you've seen in this video is enough to convince you, there's also a reservation form, which you can fill out to officially claim your cube in the very first shipment order. No payment required. And lastly, of course, sending and sharing this video around to people who might be interested to help spread the word on what I'm building would be incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for your support.